You step outside into the freezing air. The wind hits your face like shattered glass. It is a cold so absolute it burns the very bottom of your lungs. You pull your jacket tighter. You rush back to the warmth of your car. What if you could never go back inside? For 99% of human history, this wasn't a hypothetical. There was no heated car waiting. There was no heavy insulated door to close behind you. There was no thermostat to dial up when your fingers went numb. This was every single morning for tens of thousands of years. Your ancestors survived the deep freeze of the Pleistocene epoch. This was the last major ice age. It was a brutal era where glaciers smothered entire continents and winter lasted for unforgiving, endless months. How did a naked, tropical ape from the sun-baked savannas of Africa manage to survive in a frozen wasteland? You might think they just found a cave and shivered in the dark. You would be wrong. Your ancestors engineered their survival with astonishing brilliance. To understand how they did it, you have to look at their bodies. Look at the bones. Paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkaus spent years studying the skeletal remains of early humans who lived during these extreme cold periods. His research revealed a fascinating truth about your ancestral body. The bones of these Ice Age hunters were incredibly robust. They were thicker and denser than yours are today. They were built to endure constant, punishing physical labor in the snow. Every day was an extreme workout just to stay alive. But the cold demanded more than just brute strength. Did you know your body shape is a direct response to temperature? It is a biological principle known as Bergmann's rule. This rule states that animals in colder climates tend to have larger, bulkier bodies to retain heat. Your Ice Age ancestors, particularly the Neanderthals, adapted to the freeze with shorter, wider bodies. This minimized their surface area. It trapped warmth deep inside their core. Even their faces changed. Anthropologist Ian Tattersall has extensively documented how Neanderthals possessed massive, projecting nasal cavities. These large noses acted like natural humidifiers and heaters. They warmed and moistened the freezing, dry Ice Age air before it could reach their delicate lungs. Your ancestors literally evolved an internal central heating system for their breath. But biology alone was not enough. Temperatures regularly plummeted to 30 or 40 degrees below zero. You had to invent your way out of the cold. Imagine waking up in the dead of winter on the frozen steppes of what is now Eastern Europe. The sun barely rises above the horizon. The landscape is a blinding white expanse of snow and ice. Where do you sleep when there are no caves around? You build a fortress out of giants. At an archaeological site called Mazyrik in modern-day Ukraine, researchers unearthed something almost unbelievable. They found the ruins of massive, complex structures built entirely out of mammoth bones. Your ancestors hunted these enormous beasts. Then they used their massive skulls, jaws, and tusks to construct architectural masterpieces. They interlocked the bones like prehistoric puzzle pieces to form a sturdy dome. They used the massive curved tusks to support the roof. Then they draped the entire structure in heavy, thick animal hides. Inside, a central hearth burned continuously. It was not a primitive lean-to. It was a highly insulated, windproof home that kept your family warm while blizzards raged outside. Can you imagine the sheer willpower required to construct a house from the bones of a 5-ton elephant? You need more than a house, though. You need layers. You cannot survive a sub-zero winter wrapped in a single, loose animal skin. The cold will find the gaps. It will slip around the edges and drain the heat from your core. Your ancestors had to invent tailoring. In the frozen earth of Sungir, Russia, archaeologists discovered a burial site dating back over 30,000 years. The people buried there were not just wearing crude hides. They were wearing highly complex, fitted garments tailored specifically to their bodies. Researchers found thousands of hand-carved mammoth ivory beads perfectly arranged in rows. These beads had been sewn directly onto their clothing. This discovery proved that your ancestors had invented the eyed needle. They used tiny, sharp slivers of bone to punch holes. They stitched hides together with animal sinew. They created tight-fitting pants, enclosed boots, and heavy parkas that sealed in their body heat. They understood the concept of layered insulation millennia before modern survivalists. They crafted base layers to wick away sweat, and heavy outer layers to block the wind. How do you catch a reindeer when the snow is waist deep? You cannot simply run after them. Your ancestors had to outsmart their prey. They studied the migration routes. They identified the exact valleys and river crossings where herds would be forced into narrow bottlenecks. They used the terrain as a weapon. They crafted specialized spears with beautifully fluted stone points. These points were designed to cause massive blood loss. They brought down large game quickly before it could escape into the blizzard. The otlotl, a spear-throwing device, was eventually developed to launch projectiles with lethal force. You could strike with accuracy from a safe distance. This meant less energy spent chasing. It meant fewer calories burned in the freezing air. Yet, the absolute greatest threat during an Ice Age winter was not the freezing temperature. It was something far more insidious. It was starvation. The cold was a constant enemy, but the lack of calories was the silent killer. When winter sets in, the plant life vanishes. The berries are gone. The edible roots are buried under feet of impenetrable, frozen soil. Your entire survival depends almost entirely on hunting. But there is a deadly trap hidden in a pure meat diet. Have you ever heard of protein poisoning? If you eat only lean meat, your body burns more energy digesting the protein than it actually receives from the food. You will literally starve to death with a full stomach. This is also known as rabbit starvation, because small game like rabbits have almost no fat on their bodies. To survive the long, dark winter, your ancestors needed fat. Fat was the ultimate currency of the Ice Age. Archaeologist John Speth has spent his career studying how early humans hunted and consumed their food. His research highlights a counterintuitive truth about prehistoric survival. Your ancestors were not just hunting for meat. They were hunting specifically for fat. When they took down a reindeer or a wild horse, they targeted the fattiest parts of the animal first. They craved the brain. They ate the tongue. They prioritized the thick layers of fat around the internal organs. But the most crucial source of fat was locked away inside the skeleton. Your ancestors became masters of bone marrow extraction. They used heavy stone hammers to smash open the long bones of their prey. They scooped out the rich, calorie-dense marrow inside. It was prehistoric butter. Without it, the winter would have consumed them. Speth's research also suggests they may have deliberately fermented meat and fat. They stored it in freezing bogs or under the ice to preserve it for the leanest months. They were not just eating to survive the day. They were planning. They were calculating their caloric needs for a winter that seemed to have no end. Once the sun went down, the real test began. Winter nights in the Ice Age lasted for up to 16 hours. The darkness was absolute. The cold outside the Mammoth bone hut was lethal. This is where survival stopped being just about calories and started being about your mind. How do you survive months of freezing darkness without losing your sanity? You gather around the fire. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner has studied the impact of firelight on human social behavior. Her research shows that daytime conversations among hunter-gatherers are usually about practical things. They talk about finding food or navigating terrain. But at night, around the fire, the conversation shifts entirely. The night is for storytelling. The night is for singing. It is for sharing myths. It is for building the social bonds that hold a tribe together. Your ancestors did not just sit in silence. They used the long, freezing nights to weave the cultural fabric of humanity. The fire kept their bodies alive. But the stories kept their minds intact. They shared knowledge of past winters, teaching the younger generation how to survive. Think about what this means for a moment. Every single day was a calculated risk against the elements. If the hearth fire went out, you might not wake up. If the hunt failed, the entire group suffered. You had to rely entirely on the people around you. Survival was not a solo endeavor. The idea of the lone wolf surviving the wilderness is a modern myth. In the Ice Age, isolation meant certain death. You survived because you were part of a tight-knit community. You shared the fat. You stitched the clothes together. You kept the fire burning for each other while the wind screamed outside. Your ancestors survived the deadliest winters in human history through sheer, unyielding cooperation. This brutal environment forged the modern human brain. It forced you to plan. It forced you to communicate. It forced you to innovate. The cold pushed your ancestors to their absolute limits. In response, they invented the technologies and social bonds that define us today. Today, You live in a world where winter is an